Yes, I do. Yep. It's on that, but yeah, it's on the budget. Yeah. That's true. Okay. I never took speech. Probably should have. You want to switch clothes? Well, I'll move it before we shut the door. You want it up there? Yeah. We should go look at estate sale. All kinds. Person must have really liked clowns. There's a lot of clowns. A lot of clown pictures. Got a lot of clown pictures, clown pictures, clown statues, and Coca-Cola. And big, great big Santa Claus, advertising signs for the Coke, all kinds of Coke stuff like that. Big. Yeah, be nice. I'm dressed up in class, cleaned up, I must have looked at something. I'm never this neat this morning. 10 to 5. No, Tom is from the house on the Esper, and Anne's at it. Yeah, I think he's the one who told us about it. Either Atlanta or Waldo and Macro Atlanta and Don. When we saw that, and I think that's when we saw the little thing out there. Yeah. Anymore. I'll do it again. I can do it. No, I can't. Will you stop it? Back. Fall out. Yeah, you hurt yourself. I just don't think. He did that just perfectly. Yeah. Mike Smith, yeah. Just sit there. You've been doing it. Doing these. Water carrier. Oh, okay, that's right. I get my lipstick all over my mouth.
You would have liked it.
I don't think you're probably
Yeah. I don't remember to do it. I don't remember to do it. Oh, it's been clean all my life.
Yeah. Not good.
Jamie, let us know where you want us to stay. Welcome. Can you hear me? If I do that, okay. I haven't looked up for a minute or two, and it was so nice to see so many of you here. I'd like to welcome you to the second Centennial Homes program this summer of 2020. We've done this. This is for 5 years we've done it. And we have certainly learned a lot over the years. And we have some people in the audience who've been here before and presented, and I'm so glad to see you here. You might take a minute, just if you haven't already, to look at your cell phone and be sure you turn it on. I turned mine off before I came, so I thought I'd probably forget it once I did this. I'd like to thank our board members that have helped set up and keep everything cool, calm, and collected. And especially thank Jamie Clemens, our director, who's right up here in front. She's been in charge of all of the videotaping this year because the other fellow that usually helps her is stranded in Muncie for the summer. And and she's even figured out a Zoom presentation for this one too. I think Bill Ruddle inspired her for the last presentation to go ahead and figure out how to do that. So it is taped, and you'll be able to access it from your computer through the museum website. Through the museum website. Hopefully it works. I really appreciated the newspaper coverage. I got a little worried last week when there was only just an article, little small article in Cruisin', and didn't mention the times at all. And so yesterday when I read the paper, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Additionally, the WPOA newsletter, I think that's something that's really helpful, Jim Kroger, and putting that so you can put it on your calendar early in the summer. And several other websites have had the information on it. And thinking ahead to next summer, we're hoping to expand a little bit on Ogden Island. And I've talked to one person who was unable to come today to present, and then another person who I just said, okay, I'm just going to call and find out. And so maybe a couple more people on Ogden Island will present at one of the programs next summer. And then I think we're also going to do Cottingham Beach. The people on Cottingham Beach don't know that, because I haven't started contacting them about that. Hopefully that'll work out next summer. And we're always interested in new ideas. If you have some, please stop by afterwards and let me know. Because I can cook up a lot of things, but I always like the input of everybody else also. Don't forget to stop by the museum. There is a display case on the restaurants, small restaurants that have been around the lake, and then also on the Wawasee Yacht Club. So just be sure and stop by, and there's always other interesting things in there too to show you. This painting by Mary Fishers and Clara Emery will kind of set the tone for today's program. It probably was done in the 1920s or 30s at their cottage on Sand Point, and so it would be looking out to the south side of the lake. And I'd like to thank Bob Fisher for sending me this photograph through email from Florida. And I just had happened to talk to his mom, who has passed away several years ago, and she just mentioned that she had this painting. Unfortunately, Bob had it, so that worked out great. And now I have control of this. We're going to start our journey along Ogden Point Road at the Spink Condos. From 1879 to 1947, there was a hotel on this property. Started with the Cedar Beach Hotel, then that burned, and the Wawasee Inn, that burned, then the Spink Hotel, which is reincarnated as the Spink Condos. It's only natural that there be additional recreational opportunities in this area. This is the home as you turn onto Seth Ward Road to go down Ogden Island Road. You'll notice a house on the left is situated on the S curve. Just this past winter, my husband and I were going for a ride over on that part of the lake, and we met Tom and Connie Combs while they were getting out of their house too, I believe. And you're going to enjoy the story of this house. I'd like to introduce Tom Combs.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. We bought the house about 28 years ago, I never this year exactly. But, was a pine tree right here at the time, and a lot of people, when we cut that down, stopped and were mourning because it was such a monument to the area. Having been in the roofing business, I knew that it was way too close to the house, so it had to come down. These are just pictures here of the house that it is today. This is probably a little more recent here. This would be facing east. The house was built in 1885, 20 years after the Civil War, which is 1865. And I want to take you to the basement. Some of this you will understand. Some of you are aware that there was a time when in your basement that you only way to get to your basement was from the outside entrance. There's still the remnants of the basement still here. The only thing that you can see today that lets you know the age of it is looking at some of the plaster, the rafters. The rafters are at least 2 inches, if not 2 1/4. They're rough sawn. We're not picking up real well, but you can see the rafters like this right here. They come through as well. I thought this over here I thought was kind of interesting because we've got several places in this Michigan basement where you've got canning and it goes all the way around. Now this is kind of cool here. You have to look, this was the name of the person who probably laid the stone up. It starts out and it says July 24, and it says 18, I believe it's 90, 92. We question exactly, but that obviously was probably put in after going up into the attic. One thing I didn't know until we started remodeling it about 7 years ago was that when they put plaster on, you can see the plaster here. This will be on the interior wall. This is going to, if you were in our attic, you walk through and it's right here, the doorway. It was never finished. So anyways, we've got the inside wall here, and it's tonguing through, and then you can see the plaster here. On the outside, they call this shiplap. And what's really interesting I find on the shiplap is if you look closely, the tolerance here is about an inch. Here it's about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a half. And so I'm not sure in those days if they had a lumber or not, but they got the job done. On the back over here, when we did the house, it was obviously done in several different phases. You had the plaster wall, and then in this situation here, we had plaster on top of it. If you look at this right here, that would have been the existing plaster. Well, one thing I would point out to you, and I couldn't get a picture of it, but a lot of you are aware of lap that you put your plaster in. And that's the only pictures I got, but I also saw, and didn't get a picture of it, where they used the screen, and they put the plaster in the screen. Most people are familiar with that. Going back to World War I and World War II, I'm not sure which, or maybe both, they wouldn't allow you to use metal because they wanted that for the war effort. So they went to the wood. You would think it'd be just the opposite, but they went to the wood because it was cheaper. And that's what you see here. You see the wood over here, but then they came back in probably, I don't know, 60s. And this is the screen in here. That's the only picture I got. And so you have to kind of visualize in your mind that it was plaster, and they would want to do something different. So then they ended up going to over that with the screen. This goes back to the main floor, and this you can see here when it was remodeled. You can see that black over here and the plaster. We have a guest house, and those of you who have been past our house, everybody that passed it, I'm going to guess some kind of the guest house is kind of interesting. We're not really sure when it was built. We know that I was figured because at least there's lumens on this side over here that indicates to me from a construction standpoint that it was probably being done in the 50s possibly. And I couldn't get it to bring it today, but it is actually older than that. But what's interesting is when you walk in this door and you turn and you go this way, this flight of stairs goes up. There's a landing right here. I'm 6 foot and I have to duck to get into there. So it tells me that probably getting into this place, well, two things. One, it could have been a chicken coop. Or there probably was maybe an entrance that went to this here outside. There's no evidence of it, so I can't really check it. So anyway, you get there, you turn this way. It's kind of interesting when you drive by the next time. I think you might. There's 4 bedrooms up there. 2 little bedrooms, you ever saw. So anyways, but here again, I'm not sure how all this took place. I'm not sure what was there. We had a guest that I will show you that he referred to as the house. Probably correct. It could have been quarters for, whoever at the time. Getting back to the Georgia House Seminary, my wife's uncle, who was a Crozier brother back in the 50s, maybe earlier than that, before he passed, he came up to see us. And if you notice that when you go down Ogden, to your left as you pass our house, there's a lot of walnut trees in there. There's walnut trees in our yard. And if you notice those walnut trees are in line, the thought being is that they were going to raise these walnut trees to harvest at some future date. Not knowing what the economy would bring them today, I think what you can get, well, most people won't even pay them trees down. But I want to show you that if you go by, you'll see those in our yard. This is a big tree here, a walnut tree. Unfortunately, it would be worth probably some serious money, but the problem with it is hollow. I found up in here, shortly after I moved there, there was an electric insulator. I really couldn't understand what that was there for. But Brother Eugene from the Grocery House explained that to me. That back in them woods, past the tennis court, you can see where they had marked it off at one time. And what they were doing is they were trying to put together a hockey team, Grocery Brothers. And this is, I don't know, this kind of fun. Well, anyways, they put electric lights out there so they could practice at night. Well, that year they, as he described, they coordinated off, put in there whatever. I don't think that history back in the days, so I'm not sure how we got the water, but that winter it never froze. So that was the end of the hockey team for the Georgia House. So back there, there was a lot of stuff. I'm going to show you that one, and push those there. If you look at our house right there, I think that's right, right? Excuse me. This is a redwood, or excuse me, red oak. This is a close-up view of it. And that sets right next to the patio that we have. I have to think that 200 years ago, or whenever that tree started, they tell me that there's 2 trees here that I would talk about. That they're over 200 years old. But redwoods are notorious for opening up and being hollow. And trust me, we have given strong consideration cutting that redwood down, or excuse me, that red oak down for that reason, because I think one of these go land on the house. But I have to think, wouldn't it be interesting to see what's inside that tree? Because every time somebody walked over there, they had to throw something in there. And I almost went to the point the other a few years ago getting an X-ray on the ground. Well, anyways, then we go to this tree. Here's the driveway. And anyways, you go to the driveway in this tree right here. This is it right. This is the other part of red oak, or excuse me, white oak. White oaks take longer with the both over 6 foot in diameter. And give you an idea how they are. When we moved there 20-some years ago, whatever, I got Phillips in there to trim the tree back. Trees are this New Paris. New Paris? Oh, Pearson, yeah. Anyways, he came up and came back and handed me this, probably a quarter, not a quarter, but probably a 16-inch wire from the left. And he said, "You know what this is?" I said, "I have no idea." He said, "I got out of the street, the white oak." And has anybody ever heard of crystal radio? Back in the early 1900s, that was the only thing that you could do. And so what they've done is they put that wire in that tree, and he found it clear up there because that's the tree ran. They took it up there with him. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If you don't know what crystal radio is, you might not do exploration, but we're going to find out what it is. I know they hooked it up to a battery. There was no tubes. There was crystals, however that word, but anyway, that wire came out of the tree. Getting back to Septward, we didn't get quite into that. We're on Septward. Some of you probably knew of Septward. Everything was gold. His shoes were gold. There were just a lot of things that the guy did. I understand when his wife died, he put her in a cottage, like 2 weeks to find him and take to resume the body from his house. Interesting guy. But if you don't know who he is to explain to me, he was like the ethnic native of Syracuse. We had some interesting guests at our house. This was back about 5 years ago. This guy here, I caught him coming down 13. Horses were just sopping wet. I turned around and I said, "You need a place to stay for the night." Well, it turns out he stayed for about 4 nights. They went in the guest house, and he's the one who called it the bunkhouse. But the guy was from Montana. He was headed towards the East Coast. He'd come from Montana and headed to the East Coast. This was the second trip that he's made over the years out there, and his mission was to feed the kids. How well he did, it was really quite interesting to have around 3 houses, 3 horses for the weekend out place. And I don't know if any of you were there at that time. Did you see the horses? Anyways, I had people, "Did you know any of the horses in the yard?" Oh, I thought they were cattle. And that's let me check my notes here. Yeah, nothing. Oh, getting back to our house, it was known as a horse stable, gas station, a restaurant, and was an overflow for visiting groups. And in the 60s, it was a hippie hangout. And Ian, do you have your dad's picture in here?
My dad, like, we live across from the old Anchor Inn, bed and breakfast on 13. And my dad would always say, that wasn't the first Anchor Inn. And he believes that this house was the first Anchor Inn. Dad lived on Sandpoint, and when he was young, and he'd go back and forth between Sandpoint and Wawasee Golf Course and Bishop's Marina. And he also believes that this house was the site of a stable where you could rent horses and for the day. Like people staying at the stable could rent horses for the day. And sometimes if those horses weren't rented, Dad and his brother would ride those horses just to exercise them for the day down Ogden Island. And at that point, the road went in front of the houses that were there. So that's why this house was really, really interesting to me.
Well, I brought along some artifacts that have been with the house, that will stay with the house. Knowing a little bit about horses. This here would have been probably for a carriage horse or a light duty work horse, but more like a carriage. And this would have been just for your normal stand-up right here. Apparition.
Everybody very interested.
Don't freak out. Has anybody ever heard about the apparition at our house? Might have. Anybody else? I'm surprised. The lady, John Trout remodeled my house years ago for his daughter, for his sister-in-law. And that probably is 30 years ago, maybe longer. And I finally hooked up with her yesterday, and she said I left a catalog of pictures and so forth before I left. But she doesn't know where they're at, obviously. I don't know where they're at. It's kind of interesting for her to share with you what the house looked like before it's been remodeled. The apparition, I've seen her. I've talked to a lot of people who said, found out where I live and said, did you ever see her? At that time, I hadn't. The only thing that Amy Watson told me that I can confirm that I saw was a white flowing dress. One thing that I had experienced that she hadn't, there have been occasions where I would get up in the middle of the night and get sleep to watch TV. And supposedly this is not uncommon, but I smelled perfume on a couple of different occasions. I knew it wasn't my wife's, I knew it wasn't my daughter. And so, you know, I just found that interesting, and then I found out that's not uncommon to have sex. It smelled like something my grandmother had. You know, kind of that vintage perfume. And I smelled that several times. I've only seen the lady white twice, so it's you know, the way it's working. It did talk to Edie. I don't know. Does anybody know? Gary, you might know Troy Watson. He went to school and he ended up becoming he was a Navy SEAL for a while, and then when he got out, he now is a doctor, surgeon in Centennial, New Mexico. That's where he is. And he laughed when I asked the question. He said, "Oh yeah, we saw her several times." And she's right up there. I said, "Well, that's kind of where we were at, because she was never got the pictures off the wall like that." But what Edie said was, I always took fun, home late, wake me up, and she made it home. And one night, Troy came in, woke her up, and said, "Mom, who's got the house?" And I guess, and I didn't see her do this to me, but she said that usually when they saw her, she was turned and she managed. And the only thing that he and I concur with was the white flowing dress. And again, there are other people who said that big picture window there, they've seen that. She will pass there. We put a metal roof on this about 10 years ago. And at the time there was a chimney, but the chimney, after putting a metal roof on it, it's not going to be conducive to clean the chimney, even though it's functional. So what I told my son to do at the time he worked for me, I said, well, when you get up and you touch your, I want you to tear it all the way down, or at least to the second floor. And you didn't do that. But it's solid, and but it's kind of interesting. I figured the chimney was built on a slide. It was like this. It's not a smoke ledge. Do you have any idea what it is? I was watching one of the shows like This Old House, now on the East Coast. This was part of game plan back in the 1800s. The witches were coming out. I really thought that, it had to be done by France. Well, so anyways, I think that's probably that. Thank you for having me. We've listed the house twice. I'm sorry. Yeah. We've listed the house twice, and people want to see it because it looks like a Joanne Gaines house. I don't know. We didn't know who Joanne Gaines was, but if you've heard the story, and if you want to see what the inside looks like, just go to the Centennial check this morning, and you can see the inside and how it, because she does the open concept. When a realtor walked in our house to do the realtors a couple of years ago, she said, "Did Joanne Gaines do this house?" I said, "No, I didn't know who she was." And then after about the second one, you said something to me, we kind of pulled up who Joanne Gaines was. If you want to see it, it's on the I'm through.
Thank you so much. And, you mentioned Seth Ward, and I look out and I had a mask went down. I didn't recognize several people out here have connections to Seth Ward. And then I heard that the lady in white is comfortable with sharing her home with everybody. Also, as a result of this one, I never heard of a Michigan basement until I talked with Dave Ellsworth last year. He enlightened me what that was, and then here 2 years in a row, I got Michigan basement. But thanks, Tom, so very much. We don't know if we don't know who.
Edie and I were trying to figure that one out, and I'm not really sure. She said she had blonde hair. Maybe she's fashionable. What we saw her, I saw her, she had black hair. I kind of thought that maybe it might be tribal, because there's people who stopped and did work for us who are into the tribal scene, and they said if we ever excavate, they'd like to be there to see guards. I think that's what they call them. I don't know. The only thing that Edie and I agreed on was like flowing grass.
If we find out anything, we'll let everybody know.
You're not supposed to tell anybody that, but she's friendly. I have not seen her in 6 years, something like that. Since we filed, I have not seen anything, I've not smelled anything.
Okay. Our next Centennial home, our second Centennial home, belongs to Sue Wildman Rush and her brother Bob, who is here today also. Among other things, we're going to learn the history of the actual Ogden's Island.
Well, we'll see what you learn from the history of what I got. Most of the information I got was from an abstract title that we have for our property. Where's the little clicker thing? I do know that. I started out with because our abstract started with this 1841 picture. Apparently the state of Indiana got a loan or grant, land grant from the United States because they were interested in putting in a canal from basically Lake Erie down to through Evansville and down to the Ohio River. So this is the ground that the United States gave to this part of the ground, because actually Indiana got like 1.7 million acres of ground to use to try and figure out how to do this canal. And as you can see, this, where it says Turkey Lake, is actually Johnson's Bay. So then in 1847, because of financial situations, which almost apparently mismanagement, the Indiana gave a commission to 3 people to become a board of directors, the board of trustees for the Wabash Area Canal Company. And through bonds, the board of directors were answerable to people who owned the bonds who were mostly from the East Coast, so they could put Indiana back on a financial straight. And part of the land grant allowed the board of directors to sell any of the property that they didn't need to raise money also. So in 1875, according to our abstract, the board of directors of the board of trustees of the Wabash Erie Canal Company sold the 56.51 acres, which was down here on the, I'm not used to doing this, I'm sorry. This part was sold to a William and Catherine Moore. And we have a little bit of a discrepancy because Anne found in a 1909 history of the area by George Miles that during the Civil War, Charles Ogden had actually moved onto this property and that he had title to it. He wasn't a squatter, and that he eventually traded the property to Charles Moore and for another section of property. So take that for what you want. Which one is accurate? Who knows? Anyway, then in 1889. This actually shows that the island was truly an island, and most of the year it had 3 to 4 feet of water separating it from the mainland. Whoops, wrong thing. Sorry. There we are. There's Ogden Island. In 1889, and William Moore platted 20 lots on the island itself, and he put in a street called Catherine Street, which was named after his wife. The lots were 50 feet wide, 150 feet long, and the street was 20 feet wide. And we are on our house, 50 feet. I apologize. Our house is on lot 6, which is now Pier, obviously Pier 69, if anybody is used to the pier numbers out of the way. We eventually sold the rest, lots 1 through 6 and 10 through 20 to William and Rosella Crow. And then we actually had 7, 8, and 9 were bought by another lady by the name of Eugenia Wright. So the Crows owned most of that property, and they then plotted out what they call Crow's Edition, which is all this and down here, this part. And if you go back there now on Crow's Edition, it's Rosella Street, which is down we are going to get the middle of it all. In 1908, the Crows sold lot 6 and lot 15 to a gentleman by the name of Frank Bothwell. He was an attorney from Ligonier. He actually grew up in this area. And he owned property until 1917. And during that time, he obviously built our house because our house was built in 1911. I was always told it was going to be it was a farmhouse, but being an attorney, I don't know whether he had any farming or not, but that's what I was through. And then in 1917, Frank Bothwell sold the house to a gentleman by the name of William Cochran for $2,000. Sold that property. And then in 29, Mr. Cochran actually sold it to his daughter and son, Chester Dean Cochran and Jesse Goshler. And I thought this was kind of interesting because it says for $1 and for natural love and affection. And then he granted himself a life estate. Eventually, Jesse Dean Cochran and Jesse Goshler sold the property to Edmund and Eva Riddell. And at that time, and that was 1937. In 1950, then we had a garage built and our boathouse, which we'll see in just a minute. So those are 70 years old now also, so they're getting at their centennial too. In 1951, it said the Riddell sold the house to Wade and Peggy Surveys. And this is the way the house looked, as far as we know. That's Mrs. Surveys in the front. This section of the house, from what we understand, was all the front porch at one time, and it had eventually been enclosed. And it also runs down the side of the house. And then looking through the archives here in the Syracuse Museum, we found our house in an ad in 1961. This is the boathouse that was built in 1950. It still looks pretty much the same, and we changed the color. We don't have the red and white awning anymore. But we just thought that was kind of interesting. The sea king boats, and Dick Ann said the sea king was built by Montgomery Ward. So,
And were manufactured by Starcraft out of Ocean.
and in 1966, we bought the house, and also a lot across the street that Mrs. Surveys had purchased from the Riddells. And this is the way the house looked when we bought it. As I say, it was an old farmhouse from what we understand, with a porch across the front, porch down the side. The upstairs had one big dorm bedroom and a bathroom. We still have the vintage metal cabinets in our kitchen. Still looks really good, surprisingly. Whoops. Down this side of the house, there was a door that we understand eventually went into the kitchen. And my mom always told me that that's where the horse and buggy came up, and they could go into the house from there. And when you were talking about a cellar, we have an actual cellar that you go outside, go down to, you wouldn't want to be in there very long, it's not very big. And when we had the storm the other night, it was a good thing we didn't go to the cellar, because we had a pre-rich come in and demolished the doorway to it. And it wouldn't have been able to get out if we'd been in there. In 66, we bought the house. Here's what it looks like now. We still have the boathouse. We have updated the railings and taken away the wrought iron railings, put in vinyl railings. We believe the deck originally was built in the 60s by Wade Surveys, according to my relatives, who actually were relatives of the Surveys. The only thing we've done to our house is to modernize it, I guess you could say, is that we put in two windows across the front. We added two bay windows, one down on the side. Sorry. We have a bay window here, we have a bay window on the other side of the house, and then my parents added the bathroom. But interior-wise, it's still pretty much the old house, and has plastic walls. And we have French doors leading from what the interior living room would be out on the extreme porch, or the front porch would be. And the bedroom upstairs has been divided now into two bedrooms because we had a growing family. And then we have what we call our little house. And the garage was built in 1950, as I said. And then, according to my relatives, the apartment on top is a two-bedroom apartment. It was a complete apartment for a long time. And it was built in the 60s to accommodate my cousin's family, because they had two little kids, and according to my cousin, their grandfather, Wayne Surveys, didn't want the little kids waking him up in the morning, so he built an apartment to stay in. And in the last few years, we have remodeled the inside. It still has two bedrooms, but we took out the kitchen because it's really just a sleeping area. And we put in a little bigger bathroom because the bathroom was about the size of the food shed bathroom. This time it's not a food shed. And the deck was added in 1969 in our bathroom, which I don't have a picture of, 69. So that's the wrap up on our house. Does anybody have any questions on any of that history, brief history of the island?
I saw the one slide of the Amherst Cove. Is that
I was going to talk about the Anglers Cove next because Ann asked me to because it was directly across the street, right behind our little house.
One of your house, the old pictures look a lot like the Anglers Cove.
Yeah. Probably the same vintage in a way, but a little bit later from the history I have found, and that's what this is. This is where the cove was. Here's our property. We own, at this point, we had also owned this lot. This is where Anglers Cove was. It was built in the 1930s by Claude Mason. Blanche and Claude Mason owned the property. And he built the building to become a grocery store. And Rick's Strigby's grocery store for quite a while. And then and it was called Anglers Cove. 1947, Mary and Bob Fisher, who you were talking about, they bought the grocery store, but they kept the name. We retrieved an old sign. We were out paddling our kayaks one day and saw this sign hanging on a building, and we went and approached the person who owned it and asked if we could buy the sign. So now we got kind of a memorial wall in our house of all the good stuff we own. Anyway, they bought it, they kept the name, the Fishers kept the name, they had a little restaurant, they sandwiches, bottled beer. They lived upstairs apparently, and they had a little gas pump out in the back by the channel for the boats. And then in 1958, the owners were Paul and Christine, Mr. and Mrs. Paul Christine, and it was turning into more of a bar than it was a restaurant at that point. And we don't know when the Cove name came in, what changed the name was Cove, I don't know. If anybody remembers that, that would be great. But this is a picture of the building of the Cove, the only picture I could find that we had. And it was owned by this time, it was owned by a couple by the name of Hunsinger, Mr. and Mrs. Carl Hunsinger. And apparently they had leased the property to a gentleman from the building anyway, the business, to a gentleman from Fort Wayne. When we first started coming up here, it still had a little mini mart type of thing. We could get groceries, eggs, milk, that kind of stuff, and a little bit of food. And then as it got later down the road, it became more and more of a tavern. And we would arrive and park next door where you can see the machine is. We would park next door and you can see the girls in lighted cages in the corner dancing and loud music. And it was being raided at night and a lot of underage drinking. And about 2 or so in the morning when it closed, people would be leaving and yelling and tearing down the street. So it became a real neighborhood nuisance. And my father approached Mrs. Mason at this time, Blanche Mason, to see if she could buy the property to get rid of this nuisance. And she wouldn't sell. But then he realized or found out that the Hunsingers owned the business and the business had an option on the property. So my parents ended up buying the business and then exercising the option to get the ground and tore it down in 1978. This is a picture before the actual equipment started ripping into the building to get rid of it. And this is just a few memorabilia that we have. I brought a few things today, things that we still have from the Cove. And this is what it looks like today. So it looks like a playground, actually, for us. We still have the tennis court, the gazebo. This is where we park our boats during the bad weather and when we're gone during the weekend or during the week. That is as much history as I know about the Cove. Does anybody have any questions? John?
About the Cove, your mom always talked about how there was times when they actually had to take a boat across to access Ogden Island. And obviously, Sandpoint was filled in at some time. When did all of that, do you have any idea when all of that took place?
I looked through Eli Lily's book to see if there was anything in there, and nothing was there about when it became attached, I guess you could call it. I know when we were first coming up here, a lot of times if it rained very hard, there was water standing in the street. It was always a low spot. And, but as far as when it actually filled in, I don't have any idea.
Well, there on San Point, that obviously is really built in. But
Right.
back in the 70s, I think when we looked at the property there was that house that was sinking,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah, it was a White House that always was flooded practically anytime it rained very hard.
Dad was born in 1960, and he remembered that, so when he was little, in his 20s, he was able to ride along there. He does remember that filling at that time with mules with skid steers behind. And so that kind of, at least it went back to that point, but their house was built, like the second house was taken. So I think we're talking about 20.
I noticed on one of the first slides you showed, the flat map, the street was named Catherine Street. Was that after the William and Catherine?
That's the assumption. He named it after his wife. And then when the Crows got their addition,
after his
they
wife.
named Rosella Street.
And when we're all done, everybody, just we go around with more questions, then too would be just fine. Yes, thank you so much, Sue. And you know, a lot of us, this is some of the first times that we're really speaking in front of a large crowd like this. So I just really appreciate every homeowner that I approach and said, oh, yeah, I'll do it. So thank you so much. A couple of things. Myrna Harding is here in the back, and she is related, she's a descendant of William Moore, who keeps coming up with a lot of different things that we've been talking about. Sue was mentioning that Frank Bothwell was the fellow who originally built the house. Well, Frank Bothwell was from Indian Village. He was born and grew up in Indian Village, but then he was a lawyer in Ligonier, and he was my grandfather's law partner. And so we didn't have any idea of this before she started this. Also, I was visiting my friend down the way, and she said she noticed that Sue was going to be giving a presentation today. And she said, and my friend Dawn said, well, my daughter is friends with Sue's daughter, and went into how they got to know each other and taking a voting course. And I was just looking through some pictures that we had in the photo album, and we had a picture in our photo album of Helen's daughter, my daughter, and Sue's daughter, back when they were teenagers, and had no idea of any of this relationship. So you never know what you're going to get into when you start these, and it just really is a lot of fun. And what I like to do is I'm not going to point at anything other than with my finger, because I don't know how to do it either. I like to take off from Angler's Cove and make a trip around the lake to point out restaurants, groceries that are accessible by water over the years. To give you a little background, the B&O Railroad was completed through Syracuse in 1873 or 1874. And through the summer months, summer excursions were run to the northern shore of Lake Wawasee, where passengers like this could take steamboats that made stops at Joe, and all of these places would have had a place of eating areas in them. The Jones Hotel on the North Shore, the Wawasee Inn, which is where the Spink is now, the Log Cabin Spring House on Buttermilk Point, where the Bay Point condominiums are now, to get a cup of buttermilk. The Water Park Hotel, which The top is the original water park hotel. It burned. Below it, second water park hotel. It burned. And then I'll tell you later what's there now, which you probably already know. And then here's a picture of the water park hotel dining room. As many times as I could find a picture of the dining room, I would put it in here. This is along the South Shore. Then to the Lakeview Hotel, which is Waco Point now. Not exactly right on the end of Waco Point, there was some building later on. To Oakwood Park, and the Hotel Esther was the first hotel on the end of the point. Then, I don't know, this was the second, there were the second hotel, are the pictures here, with what we know now. So from 1904 to present day, there's been a hotel there with eating facilities. And then returning to Efforts Landing, which was near the old Pickwick Railway Station. As you turn on to Pickwick Road to go to the marina, the Pickwick Railway Station was in that general area just around. As time went on, cottages were built. Vacationers who arrived on the train were able to travel by launch. We went from the steamer, we had the smokestack, to the launches, to a rental cottage. Food staples were brought from home. Fish were traded with the farmers for perishables like eggs, milk, etc. And arrangements were made to come and pick them up in a few weeks. You either probably came by train. I thought it was interesting to see all of the trains that stopped at the Wawasee station. This would have been back of where the Sargent Hotel was. You could come by train, or you might be traveling by automobile. In 1917, there were 10 hotels and 310 cottages around Lake Wawasee. The rates of the hotels varied according to the accommodations, and they varied from $2 to $3 a night. Okay, 1917. New hotels serving delicious food had been built. The Sargent Hotel was one of them on the North Shore, where the Tobias home is now. They call their house the Sargent House. It continued to grow over the years. It really started out just as a house. So this is a growth pattern. Then we came to here. Here's a front of it, and then the dining room was inside. So the Sargent Hotel was there from 1914 to 1957. It did not burn down. It was torn down. And then another new hotel in the 1917 was the Brunges Park Hotel, which became the Tavern Hotel. Basically where the yacht club is now, and next to the yacht club, there's a very large home. That is where it was. So you could have gone to eat there. A wide range of cottages were being built 100 years ago. The one on the left still stands on the North Shore. Debbie Smith and her family used to live there. The Blows were her parents. The Hoops were the original. It stayed in the family from the Hoops down to Debbie Smith, and it has been sold in the last couple of years. The one on the right belonged to Evelyn Smith on the end of Ogden Island. And if anybody knows Evelyn Smith, I'm sure she's passed away by now, but please let me know because I don't know exactly where this is. But you had all sizes of houses. At the time, if you wanted to rent, especially a house like this on the right, you could pay $15 to $30 a week. Sounds very reasonable, doesn't it? Many of the cottages were occupied by their owners during the summer months, and it became customary for the family to drive to their cottage. Dad would drive them, the family to the cottage. They'd stay for an extended period of time. Dad would take the car and drive back to town and work, and he'd come up on the weekends. So that would leave Mom and the kids at the lake without any food, so to speak. At that time, there was some milk delivery. I talked to several, at least two fellows that delivered milk, especially in Ogden, Iowa. They remember that. And that they deliver milk around the lake. And there were at least 3 grocers in Syracuse that would deliver groceries. At that time, there were 7 groceries in Syracuse itself, the town of Syracuse. 3 of them making deliveries around the lakes. Also, every few miles around the lakes, there was a small grocery or restaurant that would fill their needs. And now we're going to stop at some of those places. Start at Anglers Cove. And we'll go clockwise around the lake to see over the years how many eating establishments have come and gone. Our knowledge is limited with some of these, so I'm not going to give a lot of dates. And we keep adding, I thought, I think we had this today because this list would have gotten really long. I did check with Mike Smith just yesterday when we were setting everything up, and he said that Smitty's in Johnson's Bay, you can buy pop and candy. So from Anglers Cove, you can get over to Smitty's. The guide was on the northwest corner of Crow Road and East Wawasee. We're talking about right in here, in the Enchanted Hills area, but towards the lake. Couldn't really get to the guide by water, but since I went by there so many times going to visit my uncle on that side, I couldn't resist including it. If anybody ever comes across a picture of the guide, please let me know. This is the only one we have. I did find out when I was talking with Al and Rose Swiatek that that's Janine, Rose's sister, about 1969. I did hear from some people that the guy had memorable hamburgers and spaghetti. By 1978, it was named the Pollywog, but when it sold, the new owners restored the name. They said the Guide 2. Now, I imagine there's several of them probably remember the Guide. Going on around the lake, Rupel's Grocery and Restaurant stood at the S-curve on Waveland Beach. Mr. and Mrs. Rupel remodeled their store in 1937. Later on, it may have been called the Overlook, that was owned by the Lawley family. And the Harbor House Restaurant, which was even later, I believe was in this location, and it was destroyed by fire in 1955. And interestingly, Mr. Rupel's son graduated from Syracuse High School and was killed in World War II. I did not know that until I did some research for this. Going towards Morrison Island, you turn off and go out just before you get to the bridge on Morrison Island, not on the island, but on the mainland. During the summers from 1950 to 1960, Betty and Peter Maria LaCava, who was a Michelin lawyer, operated the Casa Maria restaurant, as you know how it got its name. It was located on the channel side as you go on to Morrison Island. Their son Pete got in contact with one of my classmates and wrote him a nice letter and explained several things about the restaurant and sent this menu. And Pete recalled that he would drive to Chicago's Southwater Market area to pick up lettuce, spumoni, and cannolis for his dad. And they would pack them in dry ice. And he said, I would drive like to get here before they melted. And Pete went on to own a restaurant in Mishawaka. I can't remember exactly what the name of that one was. Bushy Roller's Snackery was in the lakeside area at the T past the fish hatchery. T's in the fish hatchery. Okay. Bushy's was famous for key lime pie. Later, it was renovated to become the Wawasee Plaza Restaurant, which was open year-round. and the Wawasee Plaza Marina and Hotel were built. When our girls were little, about the 1980s, we used to take the boat over there to get ice cream. And it was called Southeast Bay Marina at that time, and then it became the Yacht Club. And then that all, the hotel was turned into condos, but the blue building was torn down in preparation to build sunset condos. Then go a little bit further, and Galloway's was built in 1938 by Frosty and Ruby Galloway. It was to the east of the fish hatchery. There was a gas pump, a lunch counter, and a baby store. And later, their daughter Mary and husband Bill Hader and their son Ken Hare operated the store. Although property ownership never left the family, the building successively housed Watterson's Grocery, the Baywatch Restaurant, the Orehouse Sports Bar, and the Porthole Bar and Grill, which burned in March of 2000. There have been a lot of fires around here. Keep going. And around 1914, and I know that says 1916, but I was reading a letter that I had gotten from Mr. Johnson's granddaughter, it would have been. She mentioned 1914. And Mr. Johnson took over Buttermilk Point and the old log cabin spring house. Remember the people getting buttermilk there. Over the years, he erected new buildings and unrecognizably remodeled the home at the top of the hill. Near the shore and the landing pier, and kind of focus on this one right down here that shows all of the buildings. This is all Johnson's Hotel area. At the landing pier, he built a large, well-lighted building in which he will dispense candies, cigars, soft drinks, and lunch. Leading up the hill was that concrete stairway. Chicken dinners were sold in that cozy little house right there is right here. Okay. That pictures are taken from different perspectives. And that house overlooked the lake. The property was sold in 1969, and 2 phases of 8-point condominiums were built. The hotel remained in operation for a couple more years until they auctioned off the contents in 71, and the building was torn down to allow for the 3rd phase of the condominiums to be built. In that general area, some of you may have remembered that Food Bay Wong had the Mandarin Inn across the road. You can get there by the water, but across the road. And then they went on to have the Pagoda Inn on South Shore Drive, and then they ended up in the village where probably most of us went to eat. The Hickory Pit was across the road in that area where Food Bay used to be. And I think, I didn't realize there was so much to Johnson's Hotel. I would see the hotel, but then I didn't know much about all those other buildings. I thought that was interesting, and you see the inside the restaurant. Morrison's Chicken Dinners was located at what became Bowles Cottage at the top of Highland View Gardens. The cottage is still there, it looks very much like that today. Built in the late 1800s, it was featured in our very first Centennial Homes program. And so it was really interesting to come back to this one. It may have been in business from the 1920s to the early 1930s. Anna Morrison Island, okay. Anna Morrison, the cook, is said to have traveled by rowboat, rowing her rowboat across the lake to get to work. It's a good story. I don't know for sure if that's true, but I really do like that story. Herb Deister mentioned in our first Centennial Homes program this summer that his family had Sunday chicken dinners that were served in the Mellinger cup. water park. And I checked with Diana Plum Castell, who is the granddaughter of Maud Millinger, and yes, that's true. You remembered correctly that, especially during the Depression. And we think if you think about all of this, most of these were in their heyday after World War II to the time before, or after World War I to the time before World War II. That was the main time period that we're talking about. But these are signs that are in the home, and my dad happened to have this Morrison's Chicken Dinner little business card. And I noticed that it was open when South Shore was in business. It didn't go back as far as the water park. Oh, on the back. Okay, let me get this up over here. Okay, this is Highland View. This is a sandbar. Okay, Highland View, and just at the head, you go to the end of Water Park, and just as you go down at the top, there's a toothpick house, the tall, skinny one, and then next to that is the Bowls. It's kind of right, it's right on that. Now, the next 8 slides were all had Wawasee on the front and Old State Road 13 on the back. South Shore Inn was built by John Boyce in 1919 and replaced the Second Water Park Hotel. He had purchased the Second Water Park Hotel, and he had it for about a year or so, and it burned, and then he built this substantial structure. The Popular Hotel had a bar in the basement and an elegant dining room overlooking the lake. It continued in seasonal business until the fall of 1964 when it burned to the ground. The South Shore condos occupy that point now, and I think that they're built in a style that's a tribute to the hotel. You think what the condos look like, and I really am pleased the way they did that. In back of, across 13, in back of South Shore Inn was Louis Grill, and yes, you could get there by boat. I don't have a picture of the pier. I got to. As many times as my friend and I went down there to get ice cream, but there was a pier that was on Wawasee, so you could get there. And remember that these weren't places that you took your boat to as a destination with your family and went to eat there, went out to eat. You mostly, if you were a kid, it gave you someplace to go, which was a wonderful experience. And then they served the neighborhood that they lived in. Louis Grill started out as Frank Reed's department store in Water Park. It became Louis Solt's Grocery in 1911. And then Louis extended the building and made the grill also. So you have the grocery and the grill. The grill opened in 1935 and it specialized in fried chicken. That's something that you've heard a lot along the way. Chicken dinners were really the thing. And we have chicken capture out this side of Oakwood. And maybe some more also, but that's the one I remember. Johnny Shear married Celia Seal Solt, Louis' daughter, and they operated Louis Grill and Solt's Grocery for around 25 years. And these are, I thought this was interesting, the people that were working at Louis in the summer of 1940. John Heckerman's mother, Connie's son, Lois, in there somewhere. I haven't exactly figured out which one it was. I kind of have some ideas. And evidently they had a smorgasbord at one time. It was really delicious. I thought, well, I probably ought to put this one in. As you came off of South Shore Drive and you came up 13 Grand, back then, where it runs now, in back of this, kind of in the bed and breakfast, former bed and breakfast area. In 1921, Jake Creed, who came from Wabash, Indiana, conceived the idea of Ideal Beach on the south shore of Lake Wawasee. He used 3 lake lots as an amusement area, and he built a 60-foot tall slide. And it was a wooden toboggan slide. My parents moved up here after the war, happened to buy this property, and they were the last ones to run the sandwich shop, which that's what they always call it. And it was the only surviving structure on, from this whole amusement area until it was torn down, so we have a little more parking in the driveway, now 2014. But here again, kids in the neighborhood would come down and mom, dad, whatever, get hamburgers and that type of thing. Then, so you're going along 13 and then go on the inside, I call it the second inside road, which is Waco Drive. And beginning about 1920, and let's see, okay, we've gone quite a distance. This is where the 2 roads come off and on of 13. And we're getting towards the end of Waco Point. Emerson's Grocery and Sandwich Shop was started about 1920. And I found a 1938 newspaper ad that said a full line of groceries, fruits, vegetables, and cold meat are carried in stock. Besides serving delicious sandwiches in the sandwich shop, soft drinks, homemade pies, and ice cream were served. And later, Elmer Bellman ran a grocery and a bar there. This structure existed until a couple of years ago as a garage, and it was torn down. And from Gary Ringler, I just saw a new postcard to share that. Around the corner, Lakeview Hotel was gone by that time. Around the corner was the Waco Dance Pavilion. It was on the big band circuit from 1933 to 1950. And when the big bands appeared, the crowds were so large that dancing was almost impossible. Cars would be parked all up and down 13, from CBL to the Catholic Church. In those cases, when it was so crowded, people just simply stood and listened and watched the musicians. Liquor was not served. You notice these young people they're young, they're under 21. This 1949 photo from Gary Ringler shows, and if you look carefully, you'll recognize him. The very first person on the left is Tom Bricker. And also Virginia Lawley is next to her, Chris Medegos and Louis Violet. I thought that was kind of neat to see. So they would have mixers they would be able to serve.
And
Yes.
my grandfather drove it up.
Yes, Diana has this is Diana Longcastle. She has she like Myrna Hardy. She's kind of got her finger in a lot of different places around. Yeah, yes. Yeah, I thought it was neat where you can see that this drink bar would have been at the far end there. You can see on the right-hand side, you can see where the band would be set up. The lake would be to the right. Then after the big bands, et cetera, were not going anymore, then Hughes Waco was built on that area. And even though the Kleisers live right down the road from us, we don't have a picture of Hughes Waco. So that's another one that we're looking for. I asked the family, and hopefully one of the kids will be able to help us. But interesting to see, they had chicken. Notice the lobster tail on the left-hand side for $2.95, and a filet mignon for $2.75. You got all of that: French fries, coleslaw, tossed salad, and the prices on these are just amazing. That's the thing. On the after you go, and next between this particular picture and Waco was Mott's Marina. They had pop and candy that you could walk to and get. Then, if you go along, and the Lakeside Grocery is somewhere in that bay where the yacht club is. We don't know exactly where, but that's another one that we need more information be kind of the era with the launch there. Winter Sandwich Shop. Now, we haven't made it to the Sleepy Owl yet, but Winter Sandwich Shop is where Mary Kiley, who has passed away, lived. And it was now it is still there. There's a small guest house there. It was, so you're talking about the area between Sleepy Owl and Waco. The Waco house band members would enjoy burgers after an evening's work. Houston, who always wore a white shirt and a watch on a chain, was quite a character. He fried hamburgers in an iron skillet on a kerosene stove, and he put it on a stale bun. Then he put it in like a waffle iron, a smooth waffle iron, so it ended up pretty flat. And my Uncle Jim would go over there and he'd say, run it through the ringer with it. And I just had to picture what that hamburger looked like. It must have been very nice. Now off to 13. Okay. From the humble beginnings of pushing a cart among the ice fishing colonies on Conklin Bay selling coffee and sandwiches, Charlie Dolphin, who is pictured there, went on to open the Sleepy Owl first and later the Frog Tavern in 1937. But that was on 13. We have that on 13, old 13. Okay, now we'll go on to the Keel Island Road, and in the 50s and 60s, the A&W root beer stand stood in the channel. It was owned by Jack and Florence Pennington. And fortunately, I was asking my friend Yoder, who mentioned about his sister working there, and she wrote up a really nice article about working there. And she said there were a few stools inside, maybe some booths, but the big draw for youngsters was the penny candy, the case of penny candy. My favorite were those Sputniks on the bottom. And I've never been able to find anybody who ever makes them anymore. But if you notice the time period, the atomic fireball, the Sputniks, space age there. Car hops, always in skirts, delivered the usual drive-in fare to boat and cars. Later, this property was the home of the shrimp boat, the waterfront, the Mariner, and in 1995, the Channel Marker restaurant. King's Grocery on Hale Island was converted into a vegan restaurant by Mary Evans. And there's a case in the museum that has, there's a book that's written by somebody that's related to Mary, and it's a real cute, easy read. Light reading. They have it at the library also. It was in the 1950s and 60s. Mary and John Kimball, who were the owners, had a pier on Wawasee, see on the right, picture today, so people could come by boat. And I understand from something that I was reading that there was an actual beacon on top of the restaurant. Anybody remembers that? I love it. Don and Janet Hayes owned the Beacon from 1976 to 1990. It was open for lunch and dinner, and they offered pan-fried chicken every Sunday and prime rib on Fridays and Saturdays. It unfortunately has been torn down, and it's a part of the museum now. Along the North Shore, I didn't run into any groceries. There were hotels there, several big hotels there, so perhaps that's how the situation was taken care of. If you'll notice in this slide that you saw before, the first two hotels were up on the bay. And in 1925, Edgar George State of Indianapolis built a 3-story pink stucco, pink Wawasee hotel with 130 rooms on the waterfront. That's the same property. They dug out the hill. And so if you approach from the back, approach from the back, you go down into the lake level lobby. And there was a soda fountain, a barber shop, a dining room, and a casino, and Alvin Hooks and Chicago. And the local citizens, we all would have gone in there. Most likely, if you were local, that was the place for you to go. The Kunis, the lady in the middle with the white hat, she and her husband may be there too, I don't know, but you would assume that was George Spain's sister. She and her husband ran the hotel until in 1947 she had a tragic death in Smoky Mountain area in the winter. And Our Lady of the Lake Seminary, which trained Catholic priests, took over the structure, and then in 1965 it was changed to the Wawasee Prep, which was a boarding school, and 2 years of college for boys. Then the Miller family converted it into the condos, 32 condos that we know today, and that went on sale in 1985. The 4 outside walls of the original Speak Hotel were left intact so that it could stay close to the waterfront. This gives you a pretty quick tour going around the lake of the restaurants that have nothing going. I hope that you have enjoyed learning about the 2 homes as much as I have, and learning about restaurants that were here. Don't forget that we still have the channel marker, we still have the frog, and we still have the Ogden that we can go by boat. And you can even park at the municipal pier up there and walk uptown, and there's several restaurants up there also. And if you're really brave, you can walk the new boardwalk and hop across 13 and go to the bowling alley or to and I'd like to add just here at the end that our ability to continue programming like this depends on all of you, and I am delighted in this day and age that we have today to see so many people. It's warmed my heart. We depend on it. We're self-supporting. We don't get any tax money or anything like that. We're always looking for volunteers, and we have a little bit of extra time here and there. And it takes the money and the warm bodies and the encouragement for us to go on and keep the history alive. And that's what I know that you're interested in, and I'm interested in too. And I have one more presentation. I'd like Sue Wildman and Sue Rush and her brother Bob Wildman to come up and Bob Rush. We have plaques for them to remember this presentation and their home, recognizing their home as a Centennial home. And I'd like to thank all of you so much. It's really been fun, and I learned just as much as everybody else does. And thank you all for coming.
Mine. It's gonna go in my room.
Yeah.